Welcome back to Marriage or Hell Nah. Fellas, we're going to do an interesting video today. And I came across a video that I definitely got to be able to share here with the community. But also, we're going to do a little bit of reading here too, because this subject matter just needs to be tackled at this point. And what are we talking about? You guessed it, toxic masculinity. And the first part of this video is definitely going to start out with doing some reading. We're going to come across an article, but then later on in the feature presentation, we're going to do a reaction to a video that I found, and you would not believe this shit that I came across. But before I get going, let me just say two things. One, I appreciate all the people who's been subscribing to this channel. Like I always mention in these videos, I always show you guys love because you guys been rocking with me mostly for since day one. But then also there's a lot of people who've been joining the channel as we've been growing here. And I really appreciate all the love and support. We are almost at 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, feel free to do so just to help us out. Second part I want to tackle is I got to start doing these disclaimers because YouTube is kind of going in some kind of space to where it's really unclear about what you really can say and what you can't say, at least in my opinion. So I do the disclaimers because at the end of the day, I don't want fellas going over to these people's channels or responding to these articles in any type of negative way. We are productive men, so we can be able to have conversations for ourselves and don't even worry about what other people got to say. So without further ado, let's get into it, baby. So I came across this article talking about toxic masculinity, and it was featured on this website called verywellmind.com. So I started to read through it a little bit, and I want to be able to share it here with the community. So, what is toxic masculinity? An article written by a woman. Her name is Amy, and it looks like she is a licensed clinical social worker. And she's going to get into what her thoughts of toxic masculinity are. And fellas, when I was doing the research for this video, I found it very peculiar that you won't really see a lot of men out here that write articles about toxic masculinity. It always seems to be written by a woman. That I think is very strange. Maybe I haven't done enough due diligence to find an article that was done by a man, but bro, I was up here surfing, literally surfing for information for at least about an hour on Google searches, and I couldn't really find any. But let's get into what she has to say. Toxic masculinity involves cultural pressures for men to behave in a certain way. And it's likely this affects all boys and men in some fashion. Toxic masculinity refers to the notion that some people's idea of manliness perpetuates domination, homophobia, and aggression. This idea that men need to act tough and avoid showing all emotion can be harmful to their mental health and can cause serious consequences for society, which is how it came to be known as toxic masculinity. Now, the other part I want to touch upon this too is that men, we do show our emotion a lot of times. Now, are men supposed to be out there overly emotional? Probably not. And the reason why is because we're more logical than emotional. And there's nothing even wrong with that. Now, you do need to pay attention to your mental health out here, that anybody would tell you that. You got to make sure you're in a healthy space. So if you're going through things, that's why I think any man's channel would tell you to really talk it over with your boys about things that you go through, because you need peer groups, supportive groups in your life to be able to help you overcome certain issues. And I think that all men understand that. But being overly emotional is probably something that we don't do. And to be honest with you, a lot of the times when you see very overly emotional men, they tend to be dangerous to society. Just my opinion. So, what is this toxic masculinity? Toxic masculinity isn't just behaving like a man. Instead, it involves the extreme pressure some men feel to act in a way that is actually harmful. There are many definitions of toxic masculinity that appear in research as well as pop culture. Some researchers have come to agree that toxic masculinity has three core components. I would love to see who these researchers are. Toughness is the notion that men need to be physically strong, emotionally callous, and behaviorally aggressive. Fellas, you got to pay attention to that. Here she goes again. That's the second time she used this word. She could have chose the word being assertive, but she chooses to use the word aggressive to paint us in a certain light, to make us seem like we're all King Kong creatures out here. And men do need to be physically strong. Maybe some of us are stronger than others, but that's naturally the way we were built. Now, you don't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime strong, but you do essentially have to be some type of strong. You have to be able to take care of yourself physically. Otherwise, your health will deteriorate. Anti-femininity. This involves the idea that men should reject anything that is considered to be feminine, such as showing emotion or accepting help. I think most men understand that if we want to make it through certain challenges in our life, we need help. We want to make it to certain levels in life, we need help. We've always kind of understood that. Now, showing emotion in a healthy way, I mean, that's fine. You know what I mean? But I don't get where she's going with this whole idea. Now, I get that she's trying to paint a certain picture that I may disagree with. But let me be clear on one thing: reject anything that should be feminine. It's funny how this is okay for a man to go out here and be feminine or show his feminine side. But it's very funny how women like this don't have any problems out there with what's going on, like in a place like London right now or in the UK, where boys are being forced to wear skirts to school. And she's absolutely quiet on something like that. You know what I mean? So you just got to kind of take these things with a grain of salt. Power. This is the assumption that men must work towards obtaining power and status, social and financially, so they can gain the respect of others. Now, power is a strong word that she chooses to use right here. But let's be clear about one thing: you do need to work hard to be socially acceptable. Some men want that. A lot of men say to themselves, look, I want to be socially acceptable, or I want to be the VP or the president of my company, or I don't want to be homeless. So I need financial benefits in my life, or I need to work towards a financial point to where I feel comfortable. And whether you get respect from others or not is not really the main point here. Is if you go out there, be a deadbeat, don't do anything, you're gonna end up broke, and then you ain't gonna get no respect from absolutely anybody. Glorification of unhealthy habits. Toxic masculinity glorifies unhealthy habits. It's the notion that self care is for women and men should treat their bodies like machines by skipping on sleep, working out even when they're injured, and pushing themselves to their physical limits. The first part I want to tackle here is the part about missing out on sleep. Now, let's be clear: most people know that they need to get a good amount of sleep. And even if you stay up a long time, your body will take that sleep from you. So let's just be clear about that. But what I want to talk about is if you want to go out here and you want to be successful, such as a Puff Daddy or a Curtis Jackson or Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, whoever you want to be, you think that those men who have reached those levels sit up here and sleep for 10 hours a night? No, they don't. A lot of men who push themselves to be in real positions, they have to obtain it. And it takes a lot of work to be able to do that. So men will have to skimp out on sleep, miss some Z's, if you will, to be a little bit more productive. It's just a part of the equation. You're going to have to work hard in order to achieve certain results. And let me lighten the load a little bit here to give you guys a better analogy of this. So imagine somebody like Naruto. Naruto said to himself, man, he wanted to learn the Rasengan. Now, Naruto could have easily stopped right here, developed the Rasengan, and just took that on with him throughout life. But what did Naruto do? Naruto sacrificed a lot of sleep, a lot of time to be able to train and work on his craft so that way he could produce the Rasen Shuriken. In addition to pushing themselves hard physically, toxic masculinity discourages men from seeing doctors. I don't know where the hell she got that one from. I mean, that's just absurd, but that's just her thoughts. That we can't really fault her for saying this, but I just don't see that as being true. And I would have to really disagree with that. Now, some men decided they want to go see a doctor. Some men say that they don't want to see a doctor. I don't know what that has to do with being toxic masculinity, but we are in a country where people have free choice. They could choose to go to the doctor, they could choose not to go to the doctor. That's all on them. But what we are slowly starting to see is that everybody needs to fit in a box right now in our society. And that's never going to happen because that's not the way it was designed. We have the ability in this country to say, hey, we want to go right, we want to go left. And then that's just our choice as people of free will. But now we are starting to see so many people say, well, if you're not doing this, then you're a bad person. And I'm sorry, that's a dangerous idea out there. So I don't agree with that absolutely at all. A 2011 study found that men who held the strongest beliefs about masculinity were only half as likely as men with more moderate beliefs about masculinity to get preventative health care. Once again, it's like people can get preventative health care. I always tell people to take care of themselves, take care of their body, their mind, make sure that they're set financially. Most men channels do stuff like that, and encourage other men to do all the same. Now, if a man wants to say, "Hey, I'm gonna go out there and get my annual physical," that's still up to him and that's his choice. But this idea that if you're not going to see a doctor, then it's toxic masculinity as the reason why you're not going to see a doctor, that's a bunch of BS in my opinion. Seeing a physician for an annual physical, for example, runs contrary to some men's belief about toughness. Once again, I'm just going to have to say that that's not really true. And the reason why I'm going to spring that back into life is simply this. Think about a case like this. For instance, Michael Jordan, when he had his flu game, right? Was it toxic masculinity that made Jordan play through the flu? No. What about when Kobe broke his finger and decided to play mad games out there and was dropping 40 plus points on people with a broken finger? Was it toxic masculinity that told Kobe he need to go out there and play? No. So it's like, yo, you got to really understand the way that these articles are written. And even furthermore, I think that this is the perfect time to say this. Bro, I didn't even know what toxic masculinity was until about 5 years ago, bro. And some of you guys who are 60 years old, 50 years old, I'm currently 40. This wasn't even a word when I was a kid. And to tell you the truth, this didn't bother me at all. But I don't know where we're going in society to where we always want to pressure men into being into the same box. And that's never going to work for us because we're unique individuals. In addition to avoiding preventative treatment, toxic masculinity also encourages unhealthy behaviors. A 2007 study found that more men conform to masculine norms, the more likely they are to engage in risky behaviors, such as heavy drinking, using tobacco, and avoiding vegetables. Now, this study was actually done in 2007, right? But I would argue this one right here in 2021, men do some drinking, but bro, women do a lot of drinking out here now. So this might be a little dated. Using tobacco is definitely unhealthy for you. I don't, that's just a risky behavior all within itself. And then avoiding eating vegetables. I mean, come on. Like if you don't eat vegetables, bro, you're going to be going to the doctor faster than you know it. In addition, they were more likely to view such risky choices as being normal. Now, fellas, why did I read you this article? I read you this article because we needed to be able to define what toxic masculinity is, supposedly. Now, as we make our way to the feature presentation in this video, we're going to see what society has been preaching to our kids. So let's get into that. So, fellas, you can see the title of this video that we're about to watch and react to. Students hate toxic masculinity, but can't define what it is. Let's get into it. And shout out to Campus Reform for even doing this video because we need content like that to show us what the hell is really going on out here.
This week, Gillette released an ad taking on the subject of toxic masculinity. What exactly does that mean? Well, we are here at Georgetown University today asking students what they think about the issue. Do you think that toxic masculinity is a problem that we need to address in society?
In society, I'd say it definitely is something we should address.
It's definitely an issue that most of us face in some way or another.
I'm actually a women and gender studies minor, so we talk a lot about toxic masculinity in some of my classes.
I bet you do.
I definitely think it is an issue at large.
I've absolutely heard of toxic masculinity, and I do think it's an issue.
And I think it's a huge issue that should be addressed.
It's a real problem, especially for high school girls, as they start to try and break into the workforce, and there's people just kind of breaking them down, saying that it's not good enough because it's usually males.
Now, fellas, did you see the woman before when she was talking about high school girls? And my question is, who in the world is telling high school girls that they're not going to be accepted in the working world? Nobody is saying that. If anything, in 2021 or the last few years, women have been told in high school, middle school, and elementary school that they cannot be stay-at-home wives and they can't be homemakers. But let's let them continue because it's going to get real interesting here in a second.
Focusing on it would be worthwhile here for sure. I think we need more ads like this because it brings attention to this very serious topic.
People have become more sensitive to it nowadays.
How would you define toxic masculinity as a term in your own words?
Crickets.
Toxic masculinity, I would define as
Crickets.
There isn't a sort of logic to it. I feel like it's more just shredding your stuff and being manly beyond there being a point to be.
I don't really know.
The idea that men have to be a certain way, dominant, physically imposing and all, and to the extent where
He tried.
and these constructs are not necessarily conducive to building strong relationships between different members and communities.
Toxic masculinity could be like really anything.
Really
that, like,
anything.
Puts men over females.
I guess maybe I would say just guys being expected to behave a certain way. And
Ooh, that's a tough question. I would say maybe the persistent reinforcement that like being a man means a certain thing.
I guess just kind of the societal ideas of what it means to be masculine has kind of it's kind of become something so large that it's become very toxic.
It's become abstract.
You have to conform to traditional notions of what it means to be a man.
If you had to draw the line somewhere between what's toxic masculinity and what's just normal masculinity, how would you do that?
Like, I don't know. Like, I think it's a very gray line, like not one you would be able to easily distinguish.
This comment by this young lady is very important, and that's the reason why I want to show you guys this video. The reason is that this notion of toxic masculinity that nobody can define is abstract at best. It could be applied to anything. That is absurd and ridiculous. That means that women can use this. People can use this any way that they want to push the agenda that they want to be able to push. That is absolutely ridiculous.
Wow, that's a hard question. If someone is, feels like they can't cry or feels like they can't be open and emotional.
Where do you think the line is drawn between toxic masculinity and just regular male behavior?
That's a tough one.
I'd say when it goes against probably when what people might say about you is the main drive and you acting that sort of way, I feel like that is probably when toxic masculinity comes into play.
maybe you draw the line at a place where somebody feels that just because of masculine norms, they have to act a certain way and they're uncomfortable with that.
Once it becomes psychologically or mentally damaging to the individual, once they feel so under pressure that, their mental health gets disturbed or something like that, then I think that's where the line might be drawn.
I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. And the reason why I'm doing this video is to really show you guys that people are out here pushing notions which they are very unclear about. And that is very damaging to our society as well as our kids. Remember, these kids are going off to college, so they're very impressionable. But when they are learning things like this in school, it is telling them, no, it's not all right to be manly in a sense. And that's the feeling that I get. So please stop conforming to these boxes and don't be afraid to be yourself anymore, because so many of us have grown up with the idea that we had to learn manhood, but we weren't toxic when we were kids. We were just making it through our ways in life and figuring out what we best needed to do. But conforming everybody to a box is more dangerous. Until the next time, fellas, I'm out.